I'm Celestita Blanco, the Artsy sister. We're reading SaturnastraMonkey King. This is chapter 1, part 2. Like King, he too learned magic from magical picture books, and these were the only magical tones King could stomach, and he lacked the attention span necessary for traditional magic books. And as for Pierre, he could easily pass for a human, and the only telltale signs of his lineage were his canines, his elongated limbs and hands, and the hand feet he would hide inside his shoes, and his ears and his hair, and his elegant cut blonde hair was naturally black at the center of the head. Still, this ability to pass for a human made him part of the trading arm of King's Federation. So he looks almost identical to a human, but if he removes his shoes, you see that he has hand feet like monkey people. Based on his elegant green merchant attire, he had just returned from one of those trips, and looking worried, Pierre said, "I got this letter from a little boy named Inanna, and he claims to be your nephew, and he said someone from the next town over had asked him to pass this letter along as a last request. And considering he knew you and most of your family by name, I imagine he must be telling the truth, though he refused to identify his father because he would not acknowledge him." And King frowned and folded his arms, and this was a visual cue to the others that he was tapping into the archives of his own father, and the information he called upon showed that the name Inanna was not native to Saturnastra. And he then ran through other archives pertaining to that character, and Inanna was the name of the Sumerian goddess, and more recently than not, it had been one of the names used to describe the abandoned Libra. And it was not a name that someone from this world would ever use, considering the implications behind that name. And when King sat down to meditate on the name, Garganta made tea for the guests and distributed pastry. After singing it a long while, King came to guess his parentage. Inanna must be Marduke's brat. It is not unlike him to lie about something as important as having a kid. How old did he appear to be, by the way? I think he was 9 or something, said Pierre, trying to guess. Said King thoughtfully, and then he added, So what is to be done about the request of aid? And we can't send them food because the fruits of the forest would poison the humans, commented Ida. I do not have a large enough store of supplies on the outside to be of any significant help, said Pierre. The letter took 25 days to arrive, and even if we did now, it would take half a month to get to the border of Shan. And a lot has happened in 40 days, and then there is a lot of plague started. And first there was the earthquake, and then the people started dropping like flies as the days progressed, and we might arrive too late to deliver aid. Aid, said King thoughtfully, looking out the window, and a slight hint of sunrise was starting to be visible all over the horizon. We just don't know enough in order to bother to mobilize resources. So I don't know what. So they were asked for help, but a long time has passed, and a lot can happen during that time, you know. Right on cue, Garganta went to the window, and she perched on the tower, and the early morning air was cold, and she trembled a little. And after taking in a deep breath, she made a long, low growl, and it was followed by another guttural sound, and again the peninsula became aglow with bizarre sounds, and this mingled with creature house of southern mouse, and the birds, and occasionally a dragon. And after the information was relayed, Garganta stood there, and she stretched her arms to feel the echo of their response with every fiber of her being. And the echo reverberated like a rushing current, and she nodded, and then she set about to inform King of her observations. When she came inside, King smiled, and the communication network she had formed was akin to her brother's observers. And as soon as she returned inside, all those assembled gave her an inquisitive look, and Pierre was the first to speak. So tell us about the situation in Shan, and please do not skip any details, and more importantly, speak in a way that we can understand you. Garganta gave a deep breath and then said, You, Pierre. Ada laughing and then said, nudging, Tell it whichever way you prefer, and we will do our best to fill in the gaps, right, Pierre? Shan poured down Mas Rubica's river, and used slave trade ventures, captured Selnaga, declined due to the Surabaya, earthquake plagues. Birds say fun belongs to us, said Garganta, completing her chunky exposition. Interesting, said Pierre, getting only a gist of what Garganta had said. He thought she meant that the town was now empty because of the earthquake and the plagues. Only a few of the Nagas were privy to the true nature of the Lusitania Peninsula, and others who didn't know the truth said, "If that is the case, then there's nothing else to be done, is there?" "There is a small chance that a fraction of the population might still be alive," said King, folding his arms. "It is not as if we have to cure the plague that assails them," said Ida sadly. I might be able to devise a type of panacea, and it should last long enough to relocate the humans. And as soon as they get away from the town, they should start suffering from the mysterious plague," said King. "We may expect some resistance," said Pierre. Desperate move," said Gargantua, starting to pack, and she could sense that King was inking to be of some use again. So what she meant is that, like, desperate people are easy to move about, yeah? Before getting started on the panacea, King remembered the last line of Inanna's letter. "This isn't an order from Father. I just felt really bad for the desperate individual, and you're under no obligation to help the desperate, and mostly evil people." And while working with his alchemy tools, King continued thinking of Inanna, and he did not require much concentration, seeing as though it was not the first time he made a panacea for this so-called plague. And from what King could gather, Inanna had not inherited the lion tendencies of his father, and he was still a little bit manipulative, but he was still good at touching one's heartstring as Marduke. "Shocking," he murmured, "and even when asking for a favor, it feels like he's bossing you around. And she's truly cut from the same cloth of her father. I just get here and Marduke's brat starts bossing me around, and I hope she does not make it a habit, and she's so concerned she should find her own lost cause and let me be." "Again?" said Gargantua flatly. "Sorry," said King, embarrassed. The tower had been all but deserted, and the Nagas were mobilizing to carry out the goodwill mission, and it was the first task to be carried out as a group in quite a long while since King's departure. Time, bro?
16 minutes.
After completing the panacea, King took his staff and transfigured himself into light, and in that form he came upon the town of Shuan, looking like a shooting star. And this flashy appearance was already notorious in the peninsula, and his treatment was received warmly. However, the locals were reticent about leaving their personal possession. And King was in no rush, and he knew that humans were a tough nut to crack, and after offering his remedy, he would take another month for the humans to start dropping dead again. And as since the leader of the town, Baron Richard Purecell, invited King into his household, and he showed all of his opponents in his greeting as a sign of gratitude, and indeed the Baron was thankful. And before King's arrival, he was literally in death's door, and while his last two remaining servants were burying the rest, and Baron Purecell started conversing with King about the terms of relocation. Baron Purecell started as thus: "Wouldn't it be easier to just buy the panacea from you instead of moving and leaving everything behind? You don't get it. The plague has already seeped into your belongings and even your clothing. You will literally have to live naked, with nothing on your back, and the plague would only grow stronger as the days pass, and in time not even the panacea would save you," said King, looking sternly. "I can see right through you. You do know a way to purify our belongings, but you will not give that remedy. You greedy ape just wants to take our possessions, and you probably brought the plague down upon us as well," said the Baron, raising his voice. "How quickly they change their tune," thought the King grimly. And King said coolly, "That would be so if I were human, and the Nagas of the forest had no personal possessions, no gods to call their own, and the forest provides us with its bounty, and my people live simple lives. We have no need of your silly plague-ridden trinkets." After much coaxing and lying, King convinced the Baron Purecell and let all the rest of the people to leave everything behind. And it was not as if King was giving them much of a choice, and he promised to provide an armed escort to everyone, as well as funds to help them settle in a new town away from the Lusitania Peninsula. And after 20 days, his standing army arrived, and it was followed by Pierre's supply wagons. And once the humans were bathed in chains, the Nagas started a long march to the city of Aragon. And Aragon seemed like the logical choice for King, and the city had been decimated by myriads of wars. Though the walls and battlements were heavily damaged, the city was more or less standing. The problem was that half the population had died in senseless war, and as such there was more than enough room to house the residents of Sean. And Baron Piercer had family in Aragon, as the move did not seem too painful. However, he despised having to walk, and the Nage standing army didn't have a cavalry. That's why they're a standing army, not a riding army. They don't do horses. Cause horses like they live in like a jungle. The Lusitania Peninsula is more like a jungle area, so like you try to get a horse to like the thick jungle. It's like horses are useless to them. Whatever horses were available were for the supply wagon. Well, yeah, whatever. But that's more for like the merchants. Through this slow, painful march, King's army safely made its way towards Aragon. And by the time they arrived, they were expected. And Aragon was the only city in the Western Kingdom that was not in disarray. And while different regions fought one another over scraps, the capital city of Aragon was stoically as the kingdom fell to pieces. And the identity of the current leader of the city was unknown, and a group of councilmen ran the city under the name of Leo, its last ruler. And the fact that he had not made a public appearance was making the people nervous. And recognizing on sight the army of the king, the gates lowered, and a small attaché of the army was allowed inside the city to escort the refugees of the town of Struan. And from 50,000, the town was down to 2,500 citizens. And the soldiers, and the logistics of keeping from 15,000, the town of Struan was down to 2,500 citizens. Like those who died in like it was most of the citizens in the weird plague, quote unquote. The logistics of keeping such a large crew safe and fed required the mobilization of King's army. And he felt that any smaller would warrant unwanted attention. It was also a good excuse to have the army stretch its legs. They had been sitting idle for more than 4 years, and during the march, King had them perform exercises and mock battles. Though from an outsider's perspective, the mock battles looked a little bit too real, and from time to time one would lose a limb or get stabbed in the gut. And King would always heal them, sure, but still it was painful to watch the healing, not the battle itself. As with Ahi, all those who were healed for the first time had the future incentive not to get hurt again. And when King entered the city, he could not help but grimace. He remembered Wicked's office observation of the place, and he had not changed too much with the canals, the flowers, and the old decrepit houses towering over the new constructs. And grimacing, he said to Gargantua, "This city still stinks, cause it's like Venice but stinky for smelling, or the Venice canals smell like that, like rotten fish." Gargantua said nothing. She too was covering her nose, and a faint cold wind swept through the canals as the boat slowly made its way towards the center of the city. And before returning, he had one small piece of business to attend to. And shivering from head to toe, King was suddenly gripped with a coughing fit. A fit, to be sure, since his kind never caught a cold. And Gargantua gave her self-appointed husband a pitiful look, but said nothing. And she was already used to King's imaginary illnesses. And the coughing stopped as soon as a flight of dragons caught his attention, and they were the small pudgy dragon that had accosted his brother. And instead of asking random questions, they informed Gargantua of the auto gossip of the city, as well as the interesting piece of information. The population was quickly recovering after 4 years. However, the deregulated economy was making the middle class disappear. Then again, the middle class had been sustained in part thanks to slave trade, and in its place came a new merchant class, and they were challenging the nobles for influence over the populace. Time, bro?
9 minutes.
And King made his way towards the manor of the Rossi family, and after a quick audience with the head Joseph Rossi, King forged a trading contract to disperse with the goods that were left behind in the town of Chuan, and the delivery was set to begin 6 months from them. And he had placed the timeline as such because it would take that long to sanitize the items before being shipped out. And after completing that business, he visited each town of the refugees, starting with the richest to the poorest. And the interesting thing about the plague was that it progressed faster in adults than in children younger than 4. And it was one of those interesting quirks about the way that plague worked, and keeping this in mind, many of the surviving families had more children than they could afford. And King offered each one money in exchange for the child who was younger than 3. and now were equally willing to take the little bit of extra cash. However, some new mothers were a little less willing to part with their newborns, and in the end they yielded after King doubled the price. And Baron Purcell asked half jokingly, "What are you going to do with the kids? Eat them?" "Sure, why not? And this transaction should not be nothing new, and you do traffic it in bodies as well. And what we do with them is no longer your concern. Just be happy with the scraps," said King sternly. And a week before heading out, the locals heard King was buying human children, and the locals started selling the young and even the kids to their neighbors, and the economic situation of the city was deplorable, and the people were naturally desperate. Since suddenly growing a consciousness made Baron Purcell say, "I must insist what is to become of them." And King thought a moment, and then he said with a slight smile, "The human children are necessary to shore up our numbers, and they will be trained as warriors, all of them." "I see," said the Baron without much enthusiasm. Having humans share the Nagas rank was indeed cause for concern, and little did they know that there were already humans living among them, though the higher apes had lost all of the semblance of their former humanity. And the best example of this new human was Ida, and she was a late entry, and she had to undergo a trial to receive the blessings of the forest deity to have her join the Nagas. And humans younger than 4 were exempted from undergoing the trials, and they were automatically assimilated into the Nagas. And before leaving town, King took care to stock up on supplies, and he also distributed each child within his standing army. And in total he had bought 391 kids, and he rode with his army back home, and from time to time he would visit the children and delight them with his theater magic. And he would conjure out the most beautiful spectrums, glittering birds, bubbles, stars, blooming flowers, and other trinkets, and he slowly hoped to make them get used to the idea of living in the forest. And for those he sensed who had a harder time, he had a new city of Sean to work with, and it was being populated by Pierre's men. And during the cold fall, King placed his picture spellbook down, and he left the tent in a fury, and Garganta trembled at desire, and it was not often that her husband was driven to a frenzy, and there was one thing that had set him off. And as she expected, King reappeared in Aragon in the dead of night, and he was wrapped in black robes, and he wore the mask of a human to disguise his appearance. And there was one stark fact that he could not mask: his scent, his very nature. And as he walked towards his destination, the starving dogs trembled, the cats would hiss and flee as his approach. And these bursts of anguish were rare, but they were usually ended the same way. And silently like a viper, he entered the home of Baron Purcell, and while the Baron slept, the King lightly placed his hand on the Baron's head, and he whispered softly below his breath, and the Baron convulsed a little, foaming at the mouth, and then he was no more. And not satisfied with killing the Baron, he gathered him and took one of his ribs as trophy. And feeling sorry for the maid that saw him, King started cleaning up. And feeling sorry for the maid, he started cleaning out the mess he made. And he cleaned the bone out of the Baron, and he reclosed up the wound to stop it bleeding, and as far as everyone was concerned, the Baron had died peacefully in his sleep. You would never give vent to your passions, would you, little brother?" said King, more ashamed of himself. Sighing, he ran over the mansion, avoiding the sight of the servant. Chuckling, he felt like it was built like a rat maze, and even with the paintings and decorations, it was hard to tell one hallway from another. And he eventually made his way towards the dungeon, and it seemed to him that all of the mansions of Aragon had a dungeon for a basement. And the first few cells housed the indentured servants, and they were put away in their cells, so to speak, after the service was offered. And he was about to open one of the cells when a rat scurried past him, and the rat looked at him and saw the animal in him, and speaking a little, King thought, "Don't bother." King slowly made his way towards the last cell, and the air smells heavily of dank, stagnant water and other scents he dared not even process. Time, bro?
4 minutes.
And inside the cell rested a chained-up man, and his clothing during dress showed signs of their former glory, and based on his set inside, King guessed that the jailed man was 29 or 30 years old, and his long raven curly hair was a jack-mask, and this further complemented the unsightly beard. And in former years, the man sitting inside had tanned skin, and he had turned anxious for spending prolonged periods in utter darkness, and he was still stout, though he had grown a beard belly, and his lifeless eyes looked up as he heard the King approach. And Alright, let's just end it here. Bye bye and God bless.